Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real. I need to tell you, my guest today is we know each other from way back at Think and Grow Rich. But before I introduce you, Dean, I want to talk about how you came into this cycle of my podcast guests. I just put something on Facebook that said, "Hey, who do you know who might want to be a guest on a podcast?" And I got so many responses that they're
That
kind
is
of
so
backed
cool.
up, which is awesome. And I'm
That
glad you
is,
were one of them.
it's cool how the universe does that, right? Sometimes we just have to ask for what we need.
Isn't that funny?
And people are just like, I'm willing to help. Like, I will help.
So
It's
funny.
like, whoa,
Where
yeah,
were
that
you when but it's because I didn't ask, right? So true.
right. Or asking the right way or
Mhm.
something. The list goes on.
Right. So my guest today is Dean McMurray, who I know. I think I met your wife first. I think I knew
I
Marilyn
think
before I
so.
knew you, right? And then Dean was in a
Hmm.
Think and Grow Rich group with me. I can't even tell you how many years ago, Dean.
That's been, ooh, good Lord. That's been a number of years.
8 or 9. I don't know.
If, and I think actually before that, Jody, before the Think and Grow Rich, I think there was, you ran another, before that, wasn't there another book study? I know I did follow on with you, but
Right.
I think there was another book study. There was like 3 or 4 or whatever it was,
Yeah.
but
We
around in that time frame. So
Well, and usually start with Think and Grow Rich and then other things,
right,
come to
things
play.
to right.
And if people jump in a different order, I can't always keep it
Right.
straight anymore because
I
I've got to.
mean, I can't remember what I ate for breakfast this morning, so
I
we're
know.
doing pretty good if we're kind of like, I think.
Right.
So,
Well, I've had more than 1,000 people over the years
that
being in
is
the group.
crazy. That is so awesome.
So it's
That
been
is so awesome. That I know that course touches people in ways that you can't even fathom,
yeah.
and I think that's so great.
So I need to tell people a little bit about you.
Yes.
Dean is known as the military medium, which I am so excited to tell you listeners about. I know about this, but I want to learn more too. And Dean, I'm just going to read here.
Mm-hmm.
Dean is from northern Minnesota and spent 24 years in the Army. And
Mm-hmm.
after returning from his last overseas tour, his deceased grandmother paid him a visit.
Yes.
Right there in that statement will tell you a lot of things. So
Be
the
like, what?
military medium should give you a clue. Dean and I both live in Fargo, and you are pretty famous as the military medium.
I get around in my circles, I guess, as they say. I get around. I wouldn't. I really struggle with the word famous, and maybe it's just my Midwest, upbringing. But I wouldn't say famous because if you went downtown Fargo and you said, "Do you know who the military?" There might be a chance you might know who I am, but probably chances are they'd know what a Coke is before they
Well,
know
yeah,
who I am.
but I'm talking outside of Fargo. I mean, in your circle, you
And
have become pretty
a
well known.
sphere.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's like anything else, Jody, right? So, like in any industry or brand, that you try to market yourself as a kind of, being a viable source of whatever it is that you do or product that you provide. And you work hard at crafting that brand or yourself. And, in doing that. And so it's really been 13 years. It's actually, we're coming up, we're celebrating 10 years in business coming up this year.
Wow.
And so as a business doing this full time, it's, especially doing something that is non-typical,
Mhm.
that is sometimes very controversial. It's getting more mainstream, but it's not like, oh, you're a plumber or you're a dentist.
Right.
It's like, oh, my neighbor is a psychic medium. Like,
Yeah.
what is that all about? Right. And so, yeah, it's something, a source of pride because, I've done a lot of work, obviously, personal development, such as Think and Grow Rich and other things with yourself and other folks, trying to better not only who I am as an individual, but like, how can I apply those principles to the military medium. How can I apply that? And it's really interesting when you dive into it. And that's, it's interesting that we talked about it, is because some of those principles, I was like, oh my God, it's right in my wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
How did I not know about Hill and his teachings until now? And yeah, so.
Well, so I want to go deeper in the beginning. I want to go back to you being from northern Minnesota. I know a little bit myself from your story. Right. So how does somebody discover that they have these psychic abilities?
Sure. So it's a really great question. So it's different. So the easy answer is it's different for every individual. We're all so unique, just like our thumbprint or fingerprint, right? And that goes to the same with our experiences. And so the same with when people have psychic developments or their awakening, as a lot of people call it. And for me, Jody, it was really, you talked about it a little bit, that, I did serve 24 years in the Army. And my last 3 years, I had just come back from my deployment to Kosovo. It was my first deployment, by the way, that I did while I was married. And I had a 5-year-old daughter when I started. And then shortly after I returned, we had a newborn, that darn 2 weeks mid-tour leave, right? And we call my son, who's getting ready to turn 13 this November, our lovingly refer to him as our deployment baby. And so here we had a brand new infant and a 5-year-old. And it's like, holy crap, like what is... And all this paranormal activity going on. Grandma comes to visit. And it was like literally for me to have my psychic awakening was like out of the frying pan into the fire. And I know one of the things, like when we talked about, you asked the question about what do you want to entitle what we're going to talk about. And because I said the king of the logicians, because I thought it was very fitting, because not that I was the overall grandiose person using logic, but that's how I thought, because you think of the military being very black and white, facts and figures, things. If you can't shoot it, eat it, drive it, or, do a form on it, it didn't exist in my world at the time until I had this experience that quite honestly was very shocking for me and scared the holy bejesus. It was quite honestly like my come to Jesus moment. My grandmother, who I trust that the universe, God, everybody was like, you had a very close relationship with your grandmother on your mom's side. We're going to send her to come visit you. And saying, Dean, you need to get your collective crap together, because when you retire, even though you can't see it right now, you will be in service at a bigger level. And my big plan, Jody, was to retire and to work for the VA, the big VA hospital, in some capacity. I didn't know. But they always say, when man planned, God laughs, right? And everything just went to crap. And I was like, what do you mean? Dad's too, I can't be having like a midlife crisis. The kids are too small, and dad's like, what is going on? And here I was in my early 40s. So to get back to your question, what is it with the psychic experiences? For me, it was something that was totally immersive and visceral, that quite honestly, it started with clocks and pictures flying off the wall. And I know that's probably somebody's listening to this going, holy crap, you need to call a priest. And quite honestly, we were pretty close to doing that. But we called the local psychic that I said, you need to bring so-and-so over. And I was actually jokingly referring to her as the voodoo chick, because, me as back in my logical days, like what I can't explain, I would make fun of. And because it's a easy way to diffuse what might be scary or unknown.
Right.
And I said, get her over here. there's some crazy. And so she came over and started connecting to my deceased grandfather, who I was like, what's grandpa coming forward for? Where was grandpa after? And then I go through my whole list of all my deployments and all my postings and everything in the military. And she goes, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you that he's here now, and gave me evidential information that, yep, that's my grandpa. And then it was a little while later, a couple of weeks later, that my grandmother came to visit me. And it was a knowing, Jody. It wasn't like she, you think of these paranormal shows. It wasn't like she materialized or anything, but it was in my heart of hearts, in my bones, I knew, and that's called claircognizance, is a clear knowing that I knew it was my grandmother. Because if you think back to your mom or dad or anybody that's in spirit now, when they were physically with us, when they were around you, like you didn't have to see them. It's almost like when they enter the room. There's a great guy by the name of, oh goodness, I'm gonna forget his name, but I believe he is an Aussie or he's a Kiwi, one of the two, and he's an inspirational speaker. But he does a great scientific approach on intuition and reading energy. And the scientific aspect is that our body, all things, are actually emitting light photons. And the theory is everything is communicating with everything at the same time. So that way, say your significant other or somebody else walks into the room, and immediately you can recognize their vibe, we call it, right, the new agey term, or their energy or their photons of light. And so they have, and of course, there's other things, somebody wears a certain perfume or cologne or, different aspects of them. But how do we know them? By just, and it was a knowing. I just knew it by her vibe, if you will, and it was comforting, but yet at the same time, it's like, you died back like in the 80s, and my mind was broke. Like, how does that work? And it was like, but it's grandma, like she is not here to hurt me. And it was comforting, but yet scary. And it's like, so then I went to bed knowing that she was there. And quite honestly, Jody, I laid in bed going, if she was really here, she would prove it. And when I said that, the room turned absolutely frigid, like we would have walked outside in the middle of January, February, right? And then, my ego in my mind, having, again, the king of the logicians, saying, you know what, this is all baloney, Dean, you're making this. Because I was very much awake. I had my eyes closed, but I was very conscious. And my ego was saying, this is all baloney. You're making it up. It's your fear speaking. If she's really here, she would touch us. And as soon as that thought left the top of my head, and I still remember, I've told this story literally hundreds of times. It feels like yesterday. From the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, it was a gentle yet firm pressure. And it was literally, Jody, like somebody was lying on top of me. Not mean. It was more because I could feel the springs compress. I could feel the weight. And it was like the 6-year-old little boy in me, like, all right, Grandma, love you. See you soon. And, like, you got to leave. Like, you're freaking me out. And as soon as I said that, snap of the fingers, everything went back to normal. Weight came off. The room temp came back, everything normal. And I'm sitting up in bed completely out of breath, trying to analyze myself, psychoanalyze myself, going, am I having a late PTSD? And I'm like, and I'm waking my wife, who, by the way, anybody that has any kids, I don't know of, anybody, or especially moms, it seems like, when they have little kids, they don't sleep deep. I think it's just a biological thing. She was sleeping, Jody, like I've never seen Marilyn sleep before. And I'm like trying to wake, you need to wake up. And she was like, what is going on? I was like, there is somebody here. And she was like thinking somebody's breaking in. I was like, no, there's like a spirit here. And she was like, how do you know that? And I said, right? I don't, like, I'm freaking out. And I'm trying to figure, and she was like, and I said, you need to call the voodoo chick. And she was like, Dean, it's like 2:00 in the morning. You need to go back to bed. And I was like, fat chance of that. Right. So get up and watch TV for the rest of the night into the morning and dragon butt the next day. And so for me, that was the awakening moment, we'll call it, the key moment, the trigger that made me go, okay, what's going on? What is this? I can't ignore it. And I did try to ignore it even after that. And in fact, my daughter, who is very, very gifted, so is my son. I tried to ignore it, and they started bugging my daughter. And by the way, for anybody maybe that's out there listening, if you want to hear something creepy, ignore the spirits in your house and have your 5-year-old daughter come to you at like 3 o'clock in the morning going, Daddy, there's a man in my room, with that little girl voice.
Yeah.
Every bell and whistle goes off, and I'm flying out of bed, running in a room going, where's the dude? And there's no and I was like, oh, there's like a spirit. And then it's like, so what do you do? Like, how do I protect my kids from? And it was like, I need to. And then of course my wife lovingly with gritted teeth go figure their shit out. And I was like, who do I? And so I went back to that local psychic, and I didn't know anybody else in my sphere of influence. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this. It's not going away. It's getting louder. And she said, you're a medium, Dean. And I said, you're full of shit. And she laughed and she goes, you know what? I probably am. But here's the deal. It doesn't make you any less of a medium. And I said, what does that even mean? Like, I know what it means, but like the ability to communicate with and, talk to and communicate with those that have crossed over. But like, what does it mean for Dean McMurray? And really, Jody, that was such a pivotal moment for me, because I had to figure out and we've heard names probably like James Van Praagh, John Edwards, Tyler Henry, Teresa Caputo, all those folks. They have shows. They've been around for a while. But in those days, Teresa Caputo was just coming on the scene. John Edwards and those and James were, they had been around for a long time. And so I was consuming material as fast as I could get it, but I didn't understand. And I felt like a freak a little bit. There was a part of me that goes, I don't want anybody else to know. Like, oh my God, it's waking up. And all of a sudden I have 2 thumbs on my hand. Like, oh my God, nobody see it. And it was really about not only embracing who I am at a bigger level, because I had been self-identifying as, if you would have asked me who I was back then, I would have told you the first thing out of my mouth would be a soldier, and then a husband and a dad and a son, but then it was really like I was losing my identity, because I knew that I was retiring. And what did that look like? And here I was, starting as becoming a psychic medium. Like, well, who are you now? And it's like, well, I don't know. And so I had like a journey of self and really embracing who I was at a deeper level. And like, well, if I'm a medium, what does that look like for Dean McMurray? And then I jokingly said, kind of up to the heavens, if you will, one day. And I said, what does this mean? I'm going to be giving readings in my basement. And I think my guardian angels were like, yes, you will be giving readings in your basement and in your garage and in your office and in Ubers and in tour boats and hospice units and wherever else that you're guided to go, Dean, like anywhere and everywhere. And I couldn't see it because I was just on the very tip of the iceberg, and there was so much below the surface, right? And so it was more about, again, like, you start, what do they say? A journey of 1,000 steps starts with the first one.
Yeah.
And the first one was so very scary. And it was more about when I embraced who I was and I had to come out to the world, when I knew I was going to do this as a profession, which was scary in itself. But I would, like, what are other people going to think of me? And, what are my parents? This was a big one. What are my parents gonna say? Because obviously if it wasn't for my wife, quite honestly, I'm to be dead serious. I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Wow.
I would be somewhere doing a 9 to 5 somewhere, whatever, traditional job, somewhere else, doing something else, because there were so many times that I would have given up on myself. And I would tell you first and foremost that my wife has always been and continues to be my biggest cheerleader. And for that, I'm very grateful, and has been my biggest ass kicker. And I need it because I'm stubborn, and she knows it. And there's days like she will come up and kick me in the butt and like, damn it. Like I think of Rocky's coach, right?
Yeah.
And kind of sometimes he has the tough love, and she's that for me at times when I need it. And it's dual role, right? So we're back and forth, and we're completely honest with each other, which is great. But the thing is that I, at the end of the day, obviously I embraced, I was okay with it, because obviously, you have that free will of saying, I could have said, oh, hell no, completely. And there was days that I thought I would do that, but I came back.
So I want to go back to, I
Yes.
think I remember you saying it was like 3 years while you were still in the Army when you had the
Yes.
awareness. So
yes.
in those 3 years, how did you do that? How did you?
Oh my God, it was crazy. I was living a double life. So I always joke and say it was like the craziest Marvel comics. It was literally Dean the Soldier by day and Dean the Medium by night, right? And by the way, if anybody's from Marvel is listening, maybe we could talk about a comic deal. But and I joke, but really, truly, in the beginning, Jody, when I first had that awakening, I was, like I was saying, I was like, oh my God, I don't want anybody to know that I'm a quote unquote a freak. And then I slowly, I supervised a total of 4 people in my last duty position, 3 in Fargo and then 1 remotely. And the 3 guys, coffee breaks, around the water cooler, whatever. And of course, you get into these crazy discussions about everything. And one of the things we got into, I don't even know what brought it up, but I was like, you guys are not going to believe this stuff. And I went into, and of course, it was interesting because I got the mixed reviews, and I didn't say anything that I was a medium, but and one was like, holy crap, you need to call your priest. To another is like, whoa, that's cool. And, so there was a lot of mixed stuff. And so but I was very guarded, and they were the only ones in work, I'll call it, that I discussed it with. And so, because by the time, around that time, and in that time of my career, I had earned the trust and respect of a lot of senior non-commissioned officers and officers, and so a lot of higher ranking folks, and I worked with them on a daily level. And one of my thoughts was, I was like, it has no bearing on my work, so I'm not going to discuss it. I'm just going to keep quiet about it, and if it comes up or whatever, I'll just do my best to deflect it, whatever. And it was like a big soup sandwich. That's actually what it was when the topic would be brought up. But in the early days, anyways. But quite honestly, I was very careful who I mentioned it to, what I talked about. And anytime they said, hey, Sergeant Mac, because that's what they called me, hey, Sergeant Mac, what are you going to do when you retire? Because everybody's curious. And I was so vague, Jody, over those 3 years. I gave answers, everything from I'm going to go and work in the energy sector to private consulting to all kinds of just and they're looking at me like, so you're going to work for a power company? Like they're thinking like I'm doing all kinds of stuff, and like, like he's all over the place. Like, is he losing it? And finally one day, this was like months before I retired. And I think at some point I finally got to I call it the grumpy old man syndrome, because I just didn't care. And I was like, I am who I am by that time. And I was like, what are they going to do? Bend my dog tags, make me retire? And I was like, and I kind of pulled them, I said, this is what I'm going to do. And I just had I think I just had business cards made or something.
Wow.
And I actually showed them, and it was interesting because I had a group of people around me, and there was about 3 that walked away. They just turned around and left. And there was another few that were like, no way. And they were like super interested. And other people were like, oh, I'll pray for you. And so it was a mixed review. And it made me realize something. And I think this is important. Regardless of what you do, if you're a medium, if you're a massage therapist, if you dig ditches, concrete work, I got contractors here today. But regardless of what you do, some people are going to be supporters for what you do. Some people are going to believe in it, and other people are not. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Wherever they are, that's on them. It's not on me. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to do me. And when I finally embraced that, Jody, it was like a huge epiphany, and it was so empowering. And in the old adage, I love this phrase of, other people's opinion of me is none of my business. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so powerful, of saying, hey, regardless of whether you love me or hate me, that's yours. It's not mine. That emotion is all yours. Yeah. I don't need you to love me in order for me to be who I am. Right. And I don't need you to hate me for me to be who I am. Right. That starts and begins with you, or ends and, starts and ends with you. And I mean, sure. Does the ego love to be like, hey, and yes, absolutely. And does it hurt when somebody is like, oh, I think what you do is terrible? And yes, it does. 'Cause we're still human. There's a human condition. However, at the same time, I do recognize it's like, you know what? Tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to be the same darn person. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to learn to be okay with it.
So I translate this to, there are a lot of things when people get real, because the whole premise of this podcast is get real, radical, energized, authentic, and learning focused. That's what it stands for. Yeah. When we really get back into the root, that's what I mean when I say radical. Like a radish is a root vegetable. So when you get to the root, and it is who you are, and you're kind of talking about identity and knowing yourself. I mean, there's so many ways we can translate that right now to, the LGBTQ world and whatever. I think what happens, you're right. Some people get scared by that because they aren't yet able to be that radical with themselves. Right. Yet I love what you said about it's not my business what other people think of me. And the confidence, you said ego, but I think a lot of it is confidence, which is not arrogance to me, and be off-putting to people because the light's so bright. Right.
Well, and I think I love the correlation because I often use it for myself. I have no, I guess, point of reference, like, and I use it coming out of the metaphysical closet. I always joke and say that. But in a sense, I think about people that struggle with coming out about their sexuality or coming out about anything. I don't care what it is. And because you're worried what other people think of you, to get really out there, hey, this is who I am. And it was interesting because when I came out to my mom, she was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I was like, what? And she was like, oh, yeah, when you were young. And she goes on this laundry list. And and I was like, how do I not remember this? And she was like, oh, yeah, mother knows. A mother knows. And here, which is so funny, of course, it spreads like wildfire, right? So once things come out, it goes so quickly. And it made it okay for my sisters to come out. About how my sister I have one sister that's clairaudient that can hear spirits, and another that is extremely gifted intuitive, and it made it okay for them to talk about it. And my dad, who is he's passed now 3 years, but it's interesting as he was very quiet, and I knew that he was more introspective, right? And I knew he was chewing on it, and and actually, Mom was telling me one time, she was like, "Yeah, he had a bunch of, they're all passed now, but he had a bunch of sisters that lived in Calgary and other areas of Canada, and he was on the phone one day with a sister, and said, and talking about where the kids are. And of course, they're catching up. And he said, yep, Dean retired from the Army and now he's a psychic medium. And she goes, well, isn't that so neat? Don't you remember Aunt so-and-so? And he goes, she was a psychic.
What?
And he goes, what? And he doesn't remember, but I was like, we had a psychic in Dad's side of the family. And I was like, so these conversations, it opens a doorway for other follow-on conversations that you didn't even know.
Right.
And it makes it okay when you get real and authentic, saying, this is who I am. And it's like, oh yeah, that's been in the family for decades. It's not a big deal, but we never talked about it. It's
wow.
Like, what?
So
it
then,
is, yeah.
The question then is, so once you embrace it, once you step into it, how does one go about making a living doing this?
Well, so you have to look at, so I always talk about this with my students, like if they want to move into it professionally, the first thing that I always say is, I'm going to use the analogy because I love it, like baseball. Okay. Everybody's played baseball, preschool on through, but some people only played it in preschool, and that's fine. So meaning if you only did a little bit of mediumship and got for yourself or your friends, that's fine. But if you choose to start plugging in at professional levels, that means you need to start taking more in-depth training or go take more formal training, so you can refine and understand things on a bigger level. And the other thing that I would say, and this sounds really basic, but it's really true, is do the craft. I don't care if you really are a baseball player or a medium or whatever, do the readings. If it's mediumship, you'll go do more mediumship until you're known for doing mediumship. And that's for the past 13 years. I have been grinding away doing hundreds and hundreds, and some people may have never heard of me or maybe don't see me for a while. I'm still doing readings. I mean, you're still grinding away, even if people don't see that, right? The iceberg effect. So keep on doing what it is that you want to do. So do more readings, and practice your craft, enhance that, and self-development. And the other thing is that obviously there is a business aspect, obviously, and you start putting that together. And but here's what I would share and what I did. I was like, when I got to a point where I was very comfortable in I'll call it the public eye and doing public events, I started wanting to do more, and because my mantra has always been and continues to be help others heal one connection at a time. And I was like, okay, doing one-on-one readings is just fine. It's great. I love it. But how can I do more of it? How can I help more people? And that's really what it was about. And I was like, well, I could do bigger galleries, meaning a public setting. You think of, like Teresa Caputo, she has, hundreds or thousands of people come to her shows, right? And I was like, okay, I'm not Teresa Caputo, but how could I have bigger events? Or maybe, and whether you're a speaker or whatever, it's like, well, guess what? You have to knock on those doors. Yeah. You have to ask for the opportunity to be able to do that. But you have to be ready as well. But because when you're given it, you might go, oh shit, I got one. Right. It's like, oh my God, now I'm scared. But you have to do that. And actually that happened to me I have been going to these paranormal conventions for years, and I actually had a packet prepared for the event promoter, and I said, next year I would really love to be your spotlight, psychic medium, and give a gallery here instead of, I didn't have a TV show, everybody else did, but I was like, why not give a shot on it? And I'm sure he knew that he could get me cheap, compared to the other guys, and be quite honest. And I thought, and the way he kind of, the conversation it didn't seem very good. His energy wasn't great. And I thought, well, at least I shot my shot. I was like, you can't knock me for that. But the next fall, or the next spring, I should say, I got a call from him saying, how would you like to do the gallery?
Wow.
And it was like that. Oh shit. Yes. Hello. And before I even thought about it. And then afterwards I was like, oh shit, I got it. And then I was like, oh, it's like, oh, and then it's like, then some of the nerves set in, but it's like, no, that's what I asked for. I was ready for it. And so I guess what I'm trying to say without getting too far off is like, where do you want to take it? What do you want to do? Like, in your business. And I looked at other professional mediums that I considered top tier, levels that I wanted to attain. I looked at what they were doing and I was like, okay, they're doing radio show interviews, podcast interviews, getting on TV, writing books, magazine articles, all the PR. And I was like, okay, I don't have a publicist. I don't have a posse or a staff. It's me.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I could somehow figure that out. And it's interesting. I'll share a little bit how the universe answered that here in a second. But I was like, well, I know what I need to do and how to get it. But I was like, I don't have, what we consider a big PR budget, and I don't have a big staff. And how do I do that? And so I was looking at all these levels or things that you would think that you need to attain. And again, logical things in business, saying, okay, PR, marketing, make people know, Facebook Lives and whatever you're going to do to make yourself known. And at least in your sphere of influence, one of the things that I love, Jody, is the metaphysical expos or holistic expos. They have them here in Fargo. They have them all over the country. Actually this summer I did one in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. Nice. It was a paranormal convention. But they're great because if you're just starting off, it's a great way to they're already doing the marketing for the most part. Mm-hmm. And a warm market is coming, like they're already interested in, might not be you specifically that they're coming for, but they're interested in everything metaphysical or holistic. And so they're coming to check it out. Right. And then, hopefully you connect and do some business and make some connections, build your network, right? So, and that's the other thing is just the simple steps of business building. Mm-hmm. Building your network, getting people to know, like, and trust you. Yep. And again, sorry for referencing Hill again, but good Lord, if you ever read Think and Grow Rich, think about those principles and like how you can harness those. And I was like, oh my God, I'm already like in the back of the book, like living it. Right. And I was like, how can we do this? And I was like, oh, okay. But one of the things I want to share, Jody, which was really interesting, because when I was looking at marketing and I was like scratching my head, like, how can I reach out to network producers and people that I thought were unattainable? And I was like, how do a little guy from, I still consider myself a small town kid from northern Minnesota that just happens to do something a bit different than everybody else. I don't consider myself special by any means. But how can I get on a national stage, or how can I get regional or whatever? And it was interesting. I came across a guy that was trying to, how do I want to say? He was creating an environment of veterans. He's a veteran himself, and about how to hack or deconstruct how you market yourself. And it takes a lot of work, but one of the things of finding out who the showrunners are and who the executive producer. So you have to do a lot of research yourself, and then reaching out to them and pitching them. And then, it's a lot of failed pitches and, and different things, but marketing yourself in a way that makes you stand out. And actually, funny thing, talking about marketing, when I first started, I was like, what do I call myself? Like Dean McMurray, psychic medium, like just crazy dude, like what? And so it started with psychic medium Dean McMurray. Okay. And I was like, okay, that's who I am. And quite honestly, Marilyn came up and goes, no, you need to be the military medium. And since I was very much still in the military, I was like, no, that sounds stupid because you don't put military with that. And just because I was in that mind frame but then about a year, no, it was a little bit longer. And I was looking at my website one day and just kind of looking at things. And I was like, I need to rebrand. I was like, there's just something off, like the whole energy, like I need to be marketed in a different way. I need to be unique. And then it was like Marilyn's voice was going, you need to be the military medium. And I'm like, shit. Because I knew the next words, if I went back to her and be like, see, I told you. And it's exactly what she told me. And she was like, you should have listened to me back then. But I was like, maybe it wasn't time, you know? And I was like, I get it that I'm stubborn, but you know, sometimes the timing of things too is just, you know, maybe they weren't ready for that. And when I did that, it opened up a whole other universe where, in fact, just today, which is interesting enough, I just got another email from a producer talking about show ideas, but it was like people just started contacting me like, hey, we came across your website. We're thinking of a show idea. We need to chat. And then, you know, the whole vetting thing, or, hey, I'm a veteran. And this opened up a whole new demographic of males now, because now they connect with the military aspect. I see that you're in the military. I served in the Marine Corps, blah, blah, blah. Or I could go, I mean, and I'm like, what is happening? Like, what dimension have I entered? And it was because all I came into was I opened another part of me. And it's like, hey, check this out. Like, and I wasn't showing it, but I didn't know that. And so just by simply owning a label and marketing, obviously on the website stuff, but it's like, oh, this guy was in the military. When I was in Michigan, and you would be so blown away the number of veterans that stopped at the booth. And there was actually there was a guy, it was like a crazy moment where, like, by months, Jody, that we would have served together. He was like, oh, I was here on X. And I was like, oh my God, dude, like we missed each other by months. Wow. And I was like, we are in the same, I said, the universe is so small. But I want to go back. I'm digressing a little bit. I want to go back to that. And the universe made the connection for me for marketing and that veteran connection, that community, and where he was deconstructing things. And so where I started, I just kind of, you know, followed loosely what he was talking about. And I started doing it. And actually 1 year I thought, you know, I just made a commitment to myself. I'm just going to get stupid crazy. I'm going to pitch every show, every newspaper, every podcast that I see. I'm going to pitch every radio show. And in that span of, it was about a year, that, I mean, I must have done hundreds of pitches, and I mean, some were just horrendous pitches, but the opportunities that presented itself. I was given the opportunity for a while, to write for a women's magazine on intuition and other things. I was given the opportunity for interviews on my story, and then also kind of more of on another magazine, more of a military flair, more speaking to the veterans, an opportunity right here in Fargo to have my very own radio show for a time, that I focus primarily just on military, being part of books and just the opportunities that present themselves. Because like you say, when you get real with who you are and you really buckle down and grind whatever industry you're in and whatever you're trying to do. And for me, I was trying to get known. Like, nobody knows who the hell Dean McMurray is. Right. You could ask the guys in the Guard, but it's, or the Army, but it's a big organization. They'd be like, I think I know him, like, but they wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. So there's, anybody that has a business will tell you that it is hard work. And unless they're hiring firms or marketing or PR folks that do it for them, and not saying that I'm a guru by any means, and I still fail more than I succeed, but the opportunities that I've been handed, I'm completely blessed and I'm completely grateful for everyone that I have. But I guess that would be my recommendations, like setting up your business like you would any other. And then, like, what do you want to do with it? Do you just want to give readings, like, like at the local rock shop? Do you want to be on a national stage? Do you want to? And I always go back to this, regardless of what somebody does, Jody. And I ask every one of my students this: what is your intention? And one of the things that I was always taught was in the Army. So, and kind of take you back a little bit, was part of my training. Of course, many, many years, almost 15 years, I was all in infantry, right? So, and we did a lot of training in urban combat. And one of the things was entering the room. And so I had a platoon sergeant that was ex-special forces. And he was like, he would always harp that, like, never look at anybody in the eye. And I was like, like, why? Like, they're going to suck your soul or something. And he was like, no. He goes, dummy, in the nice military term. But he was like, they're not going to hurt you with your eyes. They're going to hurt you with their hands. And so that brought me back full circle, like military training. And it comes down to intention, because I think about it like I'm looking for my pen. So I always use also analogy of the pen, right? So I can use this pen as a weapon. I can, throw it at somebody, hurt somebody in other ways, or I can write somebody a really nice note, or I can draw somebody. Well, for me, it wouldn't be such a nice picture, but you can make a heartfelt picture or something. Right. So it all comes down to what is your intention with what you're doing, regardless of industry or product. And if you stay true to that, the aspect of staying real and true to yourself, stay true to your roots. Because I still go back again, like I said, my mission statement has always been, and again, still continues to be, helping others heal one connection at a time. And if that happens to be 500 in the room, but I'm not, I'm focused on one individual. But I mean, a lot of people, there's a lot of healing that takes place. And I just focus on that. Okay, here's another, I'm connecting to another person today. Or maybe it's somebody in line at Walmart. It doesn't always have to be woo-woo. How are we called to serve? And so I look beyond mediumship too.
So tell me about the healing part of it. I think I know. I've been to Teresa Caputo. I mean, I know how this is, but what do you mean when you say I can heal people one person at a time? So, well, I don't say I can heal people. I say helping others heal. Got it. Because I believe that it's all I am is, I call myself is the vessel, right? It's not me per se, but I'm, I'm being used in a sense as the cup or the vessel. But in a sense, it's the ability to deliver messages from their loved ones that have crossed over the other side to help them, heal in some way. Because you think about it, when somebody dies, there's so many different emotions that go into obviously the loss of somebody that we love, obviously. But you think about it, tenfold if it's a child, even more difficult if it's somebody that committed suicide or it's a murder. You think about all these emotions. How about having a fight right before the last words that they said to each other were, in hatred, or I've heard this one, like the last words that somebody uttered, I hope you die. And then they die. And it's like, oh my God, they feel all this guilt and they carry that with them
for, it could be 30 years. Or the other aspect, I had a lady one time, she has been her dad passed at a very young age, and when she was very young, and he as well. And she went her whole life trying to make him proud. But, and it was like, and so she waited 30 some odd years to hear him in that one moment go, I'm proud of you. And those 2 words, well, 3 words, I'm proud of you, is it was life-changing for her, because she goes, I went my whole life trying to make dad proud. And she said, that's all I needed to hear. Yeah. That he was proud of me. Or somebody was, or there was another gentleman that his dad wasn't open to his choice in lifestyle, and his, and he said, and after his dad passed, he married his partner of many years after they legalized gay marriage. And he actually came to get to see what his dad would say. And the first thing out of my mouth, but his dad's, was, I approve, and I am so very happy for you. And it was, and he broke down, because he was like, I have been waiting to hear that. Yeah. And because I have been living in fear, going, oh my God, what would dad think? And he's not here to ask him. And it frustrates me, because my belief is that we're all mediums. And if everybody would slow down enough and just enhance their energy just a bit, or refine it a bit, they would be able to hear the loved ones. And some people don't want to do that, and that's okay. But, I always say, well, you don't need Dean McMurray. You can do it. You have the ability within you. But yeah, it's so that's the healing part. Like, you're bringing validation, or to be seen, or whatever it is, as the medium, really, truly, the I guess I'm trying to struggle for the definition, but you think of that as the platform, or the intermediary of one place and another. So between the earth plane and the spirit realm. And so you are the bridge, the conduit, the telephone going into heaven. And so, and bringing that, and as you said, Jody, I know you've been to Troy stuff, and as well as others, and Teresa and other people, is, seeing that stuff work firsthand, those healing messages, and going, holy shit, like, that wasn't even mine, but I got goosebumps, right? Yeah. And that is the cool thing about galleries or public events. It doesn't have to be for you, right? But that is the cool healing ability of gallery events, is you can be giving somebody way in the left section of of a crowd of 500, and way in the back, somebody else, it touches their heart, and be like, oh my God, I think he was speaking to me, but he was talking to it's like, that's the power of galleries. Like, that is the cool, like, it is crazy cool. And I hear it all the time.
Yeah. You mentioned we all can do it. We all, you don't need Dean McMurray, but you also kind of just alluded to your students. So tell me more about you being a teacher.
Yes. So, well, I struggled with that in the beginning as well, when people started asking, so do you teach mediumship? And I was like, no, I'm not a teacher. Like, I'm barely like keeping my shit together. That's what I was thinking, quite honestly. But then it was finally like, no, Dean, like, you should teach. Like, I think we should all teach, because we teach like our own unique style and how we want to be taught to. And I was like, oh, I can, without making it unique and making it my own. And so, so I started doing, good Lord, I don't even know how many years ago. It's got to be probably 9-10 years ago, starting teaching, and probably late into that first year in business. And it was, it is something that I love to do, because I find when I teach, I learn just as
Yeah.
much as the students in the interaction, the conversation, like we're having, Jody. Like, you're like something in a conversation will like, oh, like I got to, and you're writing shit down, or it's like, or it's, or you learn like from their perspective, or because there's so many talented people. And so, yeah, so I started doing mediumship in the beginning. And then I moved on to intuition development, like separate classes. And then I started a 12-month spiritual development class. And that's really fun because obviously I talk about empowering people, like, hey, everybody has the ability to do it. And if you need some assistance, like I do offer these classes. But one of the biggest things is like, you could talk to any of my students, like I'm kind of that, I will kind of help people stay accountable, like instead of falling back on their story, like, oh, like I didn't get a chance to practice. I'm like, well, here's the deal. Like you can keep on paying me to do this, but guess what? It's like going to a Pilates class and not doing the exercise. It's not going to do you any good. You can pay the gym membership. It's all right. Yeah. But at the same time, you're cheating yourself. And it's like, I love, and so sometimes helping them stay accountable, because for me, it's not about like, ooh, I need, to get another student. It's truly about helping others become more aware of the gifts within. Yeah. And it's exciting when you see the light bulb go on for them and they go on to do bigger and better things. And I'm like, now that shit is cool. Like that is better than any payment, because I'm like, being their cheerleader, and because I'm like, being excited for them, and then hear them talk about not only their challenges, but their successes. Yeah. And then be like, oh my God, that is so, so cool. And then you get excited and everybody, it's like, oh my God. So, and then you get excited with the energy. But so, yeah, so I've been doing that. So the 12-month spiritual development course for a number of years now as well. And so working with students is, I've had students go on to, I had crazy story real quick. I had such a dedicated trooper of a student. She was started my course and she was having spinal issues. And she was going in for spinal fusion surgery. And I was like, well, we'll certainly put everything on hold for you. We'll record everything. Like, I don't want you. She had her husband bring the damn computer into the hospital room. And here she is in the halo, in the, it's like, boop, boop, all the stuff like, oh, hang on, they're changing the fluids. And I'm like, you get the most dedicated student award I've never had. I said, first ever, and you will be so I was like, oh my God. I said, I've never had anybody that dedicated. I was like, that is so awesome. But she has gone on to do great things with horses and help other people heal in a crazy cool way. And other people that have just stepped into their gifts. And it is so exciting to watch those people fly and make, carve out their little niche in the world and be like, you damn straight, you go do that.
I love it. I wish we had more time for this episode. It feels like we need to do a part 2.
I would be more than happy to do it.
I want to hear more in part 2 about the stories on your website about military people and how actually, read their stories for their relatives. So let's put that on hold for now. But this has been a joy to reconnect and to hear from you all the things that you've been doing. So Dean, if people are intrigued and want to learn more, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can head over to my website at themilitaryMedium.com or check me out on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the Military Medium. Just check me out there, and you can send me an email too. There's a form on my website, or you can just dean@deanmcmurray.com and I'll get right back to you. So, or send me a direct message on a social media and I'll get back to you.
All the socials. Dean's and all the
Yeah.
socials.
Trying to.
Thank you for
Thank you,
for
Jody.
speaking up and for following your passion and for being real, because
No.
you're benefiting the world by your example as well as the work you're doing. So
Oh,
thank you.
thank you so much. Yeah, it's a pleasure. And obviously, it's always great to reconnect with you. As always, I always enjoy times chatting with you and spending and sharing time with you. So thank
So
you.
we'll do it again.
Yes, I look forward to it.
Thank you. So as always, everybody, take some inspiration from what you heard from Dean and go get real. We'll talk to you again.
Bye bye.